knowledge and power is really based and presents a new paradigm, a new economic paradigm for a new historic moment in the world economy. How do you know when a paradigm dies? Well, one way is a lot of major establishment institutions begin saying, oops, the basic paradigm that has ruled economics for recent decades is that the production of money by the Federal Reserve can somehow both foster prosperity and economic growth, and that it can somehow, by lowering interest rates, spur economic activity or retard it. There are a couple seats down here and a couple seats over there, one down here. How's it been going? The CBO and the IMF both make projections of GDP. The CBO projects for the U.S. economy, the IMF projects for the world economy. And earlier this year, they had to correct their projections, adjust them, made just 2 years ago. And CBO's projections for the U.S. economy was corrected by $1.6 trillion. They reduced America estimates for the U.S. economy by $1.6 trillion earlier this year. And the IMF changed projections for the world economy by $18 trillion. Now, all these previous projections were based on the efficacy of a general central bank effort around the world to expand money supplies and thus increase economic growth, lower interest rates and increase economic growth. And indeed, reductions in interest rates, the Bank of America counted 619 around the world, reductions in interest rates, to the point that much government debt, more than half government debt around the world, is now issued at below zero interest rates. There's $13 trillion of government debt at below negative interest rates, below zero interest rates. And there's been more than $10 or $11 trillion of quantitative easing, where the Fed controls both long and short-term interest rates by buying assets or selling assets. So this has been massively tested, this paradigm, and yet it has somehow failed. So we need a new paradigm. And I think the key problem with the existing measures is that they don't know what wealth is. And at the Discovery Institute for the last 20 years, I've been studying information theory. Information theory is the theory that's the foundation of Silicon Valley, all the information technologies that really are the driving force of economic growth. And studying information theory has led me to the belief that wealth is chiefly knowledge. And this may seem to be counterintuitive, but the Neanderthal in his cave had all these natural resources that we have today. The difference between our age and the Stone Age, as Thomas Sowell pointed out decades ago, is entirely the growth of knowledge. A professor at MIT named Cesar Hidalgo recently gave a good example to help you understand this concept. When an expensive car crashes into a wall, all its value disappears, although every molecule and atom remains. Value is information. The car is knowledge. And I conclude that all wealth is essentially knowledge. And if wealth is knowledge, what is economic growth? Well, for years and years, I've been studying a phenomenon in business strategy called the learning curve. Sometimes Bain and Company renamed it the experience curve. And it essentially ordains that with every doubling of units, there's a couple seats in the second row, the third row, there are a couple seats. A lot of room in here and up front. But the learning curves have been calculated by the Boston Consulting Group and by Bain and Company as essentially with every doubling of unit sales, unit costs drop between 20 and 30%. This is the learning curve, and they've been shown to apply to everything from poultry to insurance policies to transistors on chips to codes of software to you name it, a learning curve applies. And I believe that if growth is knowledge, if wealth is knowledge, growth is learning. Now, in order to have learning, there are certain rules apply. Learning is most essentially experimental. If outcomes are guaranteed, learning is essentially prohibited. As Karl Popper explained it, any scientific proposition has to be falsifiable to be meaningful. And the reason capitalism is such an engine of learning, and thus an engine of economic growth, is because every business plan can fail. Bankruptcy is possible. But if you have government guaranteeing everything by printing money whenever any enterprise is in jeopardy of falsification or bankruptcy, then learning is prohibited. So the very policies that government follows in order to guarantee growth intrinsically thwarts growth by arresting the learning process, by falsifying the learning process. And you get a company like Tesla, which is all kinds of brilliant technologists, all sorts of visionary ideas, but it can't really be tested. It's everywhere, all across the country. Tesla is really an arm of U.S. Government control and subsidy, and so it really can't fail unless policy changes. When you invest in a company like Tesla, you're really investing in a belief about American politics rather than a belief in the possibility of truly profitable and activities based on a real expansion of knowledge. So if wealth is knowledge and growth is learning, what is money? Well, though all theories about increases in money and lowering interest rates and all are all based on the idea that money can somehow be an instrument of government power. And if money is an instrument of government power, then how can it really expand knowledge? And so the fundamental assumption that money can be used to foster economic growth implies that economic growth is somehow a figment of policy, an expression of power, rather than development of learning and new knowledge. And I think that, in the deepest sense, is the most fundamental mistake. So if money is not an instrument of power, if it's not a magic wand that governments can wave in order to summon economic growth, what is it? I've been pondering this issue for many years, and I didn't really quite get it right in Wealth and Poverty. Steve Forbes really gave me the key insight when he began focusing on money as a clock or as a measuring stick. And he used the analogy of a clock. If the measuring stick is changing constantly, how can enterprises use money as a guide to their learning processes? If the clock was changing day by day, the hour changed, the minute changed. As Steve pointed out, we'd soon have time default obligations, or what swaps, or whatever. You'd have to constantly be hedging the clock. And that's really what's happening, because I believe that most fundamentally, money is time. And this really can be understood pretty well if you contemplate a barter economy. In a barter economy with no storage or money, what would determine the exchange values of products is the time it took to produce them. You know, they took a long time to produce a product, that would entail a lot of savings, and the value would be translated into time. And the scarcity of money is based on the scarcity of time. And money as a measuring stick ultimately has to be based on time. And you can understand this when you think of those learning curves all across the economy. If you have a capitalist country with generating learning all across the land, what remains scarce when everything else grows more abundant? What remains scarce is time. The residual scarcity when everything else is growing more abundant is time. And that is really the root of the value of the measuring stick of money. It's the passage of time. Time is what forces you to allocate. Time is what forces you to make trade-offs. Time is how you prioritize. Without the pressure of time, everything slows down. So this is why, as Jim Grant has pointed out, low interest rates or zero interest rates or whatever do not spur entrepreneurs to new fits of creativity and investment. Low interest rates actually slow down the economy. It's like throwing away the clock in a basketball game. That was Jim Grant's analogy. You don't have to score. You don't have to make decisions. You can just keep passing the ball around and keep it away from LeBron for the whole 42 minutes. You don't have to, and zero interest rates essentially zero out time. And when you zero out time, everything just proceeds and drifts along in the way we've seen the economy drift in Japan and now in the United States as a result of this zeroing out time. So, but not only do you zero out time through the government monopoly of money and the imposition of zero interest rates, it slows growth rather than spurs it. Not only does it do that, it also suppresses innovation. As Hayek put it, the root and source of all monetary evil is the government monopoly of money. And Matt Ridley said that the government monopoly of money not only suppresses innovation and creativity, it not only retards growth, it also fosters inequality. Because what we have today is a kind of bifurcated economy produced by the government monopoly of money that actually fosters inequality. Because think of most of us. Most of us are paid by the hour, by the day, or we're inexorably caught in the economy of time. That's how we get compensated. But what's happened in the world economy in recent decades as a result of the government monopoly of money and the exploitation of that government monopoly to allow almost unlimited expansion of government power through the creation of money is what's happened is a financialization, a kind of hypertrophy of finance in the world economy. And the hypertrophy of finance escapes time. It's at zero interest rates, after all. And so it results in a lot of bidding up of existing assets because the opportunity cost is registered to be zero for spending or today. So essentially, the result is a bifurcation of the economy where the flash boys engage in millions of trades an hour, increasingly a minute, and the rest of us are caught in the economy of time. And the epitome of this hypertrophy of finance is the alternative to money as a measuring stick, which is floating currencies. Now, floating currencies, international currency trading now proceeds at a rate of around $5.3 trillion a day. Now these are the numbers 3 years ago from the Bank for International Settlements. They're going to issue new numbers shortly, and there are estimates that this has drifted down during the course of the recession, but it's somewhere around $5 trillion a day, which is about 24 or 5 times global GDP. It's 73 times global trade in goods and services. It's by far the biggest activity in the global economy. About 98% of it is speculative. In other words, it's not involved directly in trades. of goods and services. 77% of it is conducted by 10 big banks. And it's almost all divided between London and New York. And it's a scandal because it doesn't even deliver a measure of economic activity, a measuring stick that's less volatile, more stable than the economic activity it's supposed to measure. So it's a scandal of money, a $5.3 trillion a day scandal of money. And that is, and the result has been across the capitalist world a big expansion of finance compared to the time-based economic activities, which represent the reality of our economy. But this is a great moment of opportunity as well as scandal. And the opportunity is created again, another efflorescence of the information theory that began with Kurt Gödel in 1931 when he showed that any logical system is necessarily dependent on propositions that can't be proved within the system itself. I think money is a logical system like that. It has to have roots of value outside the system itself. Money cannot be part of what it measures. Money is not a commodity. This is almost the only real error I see in Austrian economics is the idea that money is somehow a commodity. I was debating discussing this with Peter Schiff last night, and he was really saying that the reason gold is money and money is valuable is that gold is ultimately jewelry. And, ultimately gold is valuable because people value it as jewelry. And my friend Richard Vigilante at White Box Advisors says that no, money is not valuable because it's really jewelry. Jewelry is valuable because it's really money. And that's, and the reason money is valuable is because it transmits into the economy the fundamental scarcities that all of us experience. The speed of light and the span of life are the fundamental scarcities in the world economy that are manifested in economics through the actions of money. And and all measuring sticks are this way. The Système International in Paris calculates all the measuring sticks that are used in international trade across the world economy. You couldn't have a microchip in Israel work on a fab in Taiwan and on a circuit board in Silicon Valley if it wasn't based on absolutely rigorous measurements of the second, the meter, the kilogram, the mole, the lumen, all the ampere, all the fundamental measuring sticks are all based on physical constants that don't change. And I scrutinized all these measuring sticks, and every one of them is finally focused on time. The speed of light is really the ultimate foundation for all the measuring sticks of physical constants. And money is also a measuring stick, and it's necessary to a flourishing economy, and it too has to be finally based on time. And when people try to escape time, you think of, you can't escape time. I can't remember what Cher's song was, but you can't get away from time. And when you try to do it, you just confuse everything. And the horizons of the world economy shrink. And you have flash boys conducting meaningless trades in nanoseconds. And the middle class foundering, and generally of the kind of world stagnation that we currently see. Thank you very much. I'd be delighted to answer questions.